It's good to be back. It's good to speak to you guys again. I wish I could be there in person. I know I say that every year. Um, one of these days, one of these years, I'm going to make it out there for sure. But it's always a great honor to talk to you. It's so great to see so many new faces. I want to welcome anybody that's new here. If you're coming back, either way, I just want to say you guys are brave for just for being here. You probably don't realize it yet, but when you're talking about liberty, there are evil people in this world, and the one thing they hate the most is liberty. People who talk about liberty, people who want liberty, people who want to be free, because ultimately their crime and corruption depends on us playing into whatever they design, whatever system they design. They want us to play and just do whatever they say, and they'll come up with all kinds of arbitrary rules for us to follow, and they want us to do that. That's all they want our existence to be, and of course that is the antithesis of freedom. That is slavery. That is them controlling our every move. And so I want to say, like, over the last year, I've always been the taxation is theft guy, but over the past year, it's become a little bit more apparent to me that I hear a lot of people saying we need to boycott certain businesses or banks or governments, or how do we actually create more freedom? Because the reality is, what we're up against is a lot of people are absolutely willing to trade their freedom for a little bit of convenience. And when most of society accepts that, we're the ones who have to pay for it because we're the ones who don't want that. Even if they want that, that's fine. If somebody else wants to, be a slave to a bank, to an addiction, to anything, that's their own decision. But when they drag us into it, that's where we have a problem. Because there are so many other people who get dragged into it who don't even realize that they had a choice in the first place. Maybe choice isn't the right way because we're pulled into it in a way that we don't have that choice. But maybe a lot of people don't even realize that was an option. And so we're out spreading that information. And of course, the people who are in charge, the people who want to control all of us, they hate that because they don't want people thinking that there's another way to live without them. And so it's been a really difficult journey trying to wake people up to that. But um, what I've kind of come to the conclusion about is, if we are able to get a more free system, like, sure, we can work with the government and try to make them smaller, right? We can work with the systems that they have. We can do the voting, we can run for their offices and try to do all that stuff. That's great. But at the end of the day, people are so dependent on the economy, which makes them think that the government must be big and must control the economy so that everybody has jobs and everything else. But really, what's happening is everyone's becoming dependent on jobs and banks. And what we see in the US is everyone thinks that the US is wealthy. And it's like, sure, you can look around and we have a lot of stuff, but every person in this country is in debt. They're up to their necks in debt. They're basically slaves to the banks. They'll never own their homes outright. And if they ever make it that far, they're paying money to the property tax. But so many people are, they have a car, they have an apartment, they have all this other stuff, and it's all purchased with money borrowed from a bank. And of course, they add interest to that, and it creates a system where they're dependent on that. And they've become okay with that. That's just become the way that they live. And in the same way, they don't grow any of their food, they don't create any of their electricity. All these things that they've grown accustomed to, these luxuries that a lot of people, I mean, you look at some places in the world, these are luxuries to some people. You go back 100 years and these are luxuries to most people, right? Electricity to your house, like, that's something most people in the world didn't have 100 years ago. Cars, forget about it. So all these things are really luxuries, and they treat them as human rights, and they get to the point where they think the government should provide them for them. And this is really dangerous because most of these things, especially as technology advances, most of these things we can get for ourselves. We can learn to dig wells and pull water out of the ground. We can take, maybe we can't build solar cells, but we can buy solar cells and produce our own electricity. And even though it's like, you might not be 100% free because you still have to deal with other companies who are producing things, you are a lot more free than if you're dependent on some government system or some banks which are financing these things, or like continuously paying for electricity every single month. And we need to start thinking like that. And I know at least some places in Uganda. There's a lot of places in Mexico where I spend a lot of my time where that's not the norm yet. People haven't fallen that far into the system where they're in debt, and they don't know how to do any of this stuff. There are a lot of places where they grow chickens, they harvest the eggs, they kill the chickens, they eat the chickens, small animals like goats. This is really important. And I know a lot of people say, well, it would be great if I didn't have to do that. And if I were just, if I had a nice job in a nice office, and I didn't have to step foot outside and someone else just made all the food for me. Um, but what's happened in the US is they've created that fantasy. And now nobody in the United States wants to produce food. In fact, they've created this illusion that farmers are not intelligent people, they're uneducated, and the reason they're farming is because they can't do anything else. And the reality is, when the government system starts to collapse because they've been printing too much money, or they people realize that they're just stealing their money through taxes and they don't want to pay them anymore, and when the government when the economy depends on the government to function, because the government is like, no, you can't pass goods through here, you can't import or export without us, and we're not going to allow it. When that kind of stuff starts happening, who's going to survive? It's going to be the farmers. And even if they don't have electricity, they're going to survive because they can produce their own food. So I know normally at these conferences, we spend a lot of time talking about economic freedom. We talk about freedom from government, freedom from tyranny. We shouldn't have certain laws that control us. We shouldn't have laws that control the free flow of money through an economy, taxes, and these are all great things to talk about. But something that I think is really missing is, how do we operate without that system, given that the system is there now? Because the most we can become independent from that, and the more we can share that way of life with other people and have other people become more independent from the economy and from the government. Not to say you can't participate in the economy, but just so that if the government were to seize the economy, you'd be fine. You'd be in a position where you're not dependent on it. That's a type of freedom that I think we usually kind of miss at these conferences. So I just wanted to throw that out there and really think about this, because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work to grow your own food and to do some farming. But something else that a lot of people are worried about, especially in the United States, is what happens when technology comes and replaces my job. I owe all this money to the bank, and I'm not going to have any place to get a job to earn money to pay the bank. They're going to take everything away from me, and I'm going to have absolutely nothing. This is a realistic fear, because nobody knows how to grow their own food or anything like that. So this is, not to say that you need to base your life entirely on this, but it's, be prepared for that type of situation. Learn those skills. If you can, figure out a way that you can provide for yourself in any way. There's cryptocurrencies. I know, I've been sending money to some of these organizations in Uganda, and it's really difficult because nobody takes Bitcoin out there. But we have to go through, it's difficult to send money out there because I have to go through all these banks and all this other nonsense. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it gets lost, and it's a mess. But if we were able to send Bitcoin out there, and if there were more businesses where once the Bitcoin is there, it could be spent or it could be converted, um, that would solve so many problems. And I've seen small communities, people in small communities around the world start Bitcoin communities where they're sharing Bitcoin with other people, and teaching them how to use it, how to get a Bitcoin wallet in their phone, and how to create this. Of course, Bitcoin doesn't work without the internet. How can we set up networks that don't depend on the government or big internet companies, to provide service? I know in Uganda in particular, they started putting taxes on the internet, especially social media, so that you couldn't communicate. How do we build networks that takes that control away from them? How do we provide food for ourselves so that we're not dependent on some importation of like food from all over the place. I don't know how much of your food comes from China, but I know in the United States a lot of it's coming from China. And nothing against the Chinese, but if anything happens between the US and China and they say we're not going to send you the food, or we're going to tax the imports, which they're already starting to do, what's that going to do? And food is already getting expensive here, and a lot of people are complaining about it. So be prepared for those sorts of things and try to figure out, get your food as close to you as possible, where it comes from, where it's grown. Get it as close. That doesn't mean you can't have stuff from further away, but just try to get it as close as possible, because that's your safety net. That's your security. And without that, you can't live a free and independent life. So these are just things to think about. And I'm always learning new ways to kind of do this myself. I'm definitely not an expert in it. But there's communities out there who want to share this information, and it's really great to know, because if you want to be free and independent, you have to realize that at some point the government really only helps you so that they can get your votes, so they can get your taxes, so they can get your votes, so they can get your power, so they can get power over you, so they can rob you and do whatever they want with this massive pile of resources. That's really what it's about. So for the most part, most politicians do not care about you. They'll tell you they do. Don't fall for it. And even if there are a couple who do care, just be very cautious, because they are few and far between, and they usually don't have that much power to make things work for you. So just always be prepared, and be prepared to be independent. Be prepared to defend yourself. And I know that's difficult in countries where they don't even let you arm yourself. I know Mexico and Canada, like the United States is one of the few. I know there are some refugees from Australia that just moved to the United States because of that. And more countries are banning guns, and that leaves their citizens defenseless. So whenever you have protests, again in Uganda, I know there have been protests where the police and the military are just you don't have a voice anymore, because they know they can do whatever they want to you, and nobody's ever going to fight back, because you're unarmed and defenseless. So find ways to defend yourself. I'm not asking anyone to break the laws, but I won't be mad if you do. But just if you're going to do that, do it safely. And watch your back. Don't share what you're doing with everybody, because you don't know who's gonna snitch on you and who's gonna take the side with the government. But maybe that's something I shouldn't recommend. But actually, I'm not recommending that. But anyways, I'll just throw that out there. But anyways, it's awesome again to see everything that's going on. Jerome is doing an amazing job making sure that this organization continues. And I'm always happy to see the progress in the events and how many people show up. And I hope to be out there next year for sure. So we'll see about that. But take care, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the event.
That's Daniel Behrman. I think I interacted with Daniel Behrman in 2018. There's one thing I only like about him is more simple than what he knows. Then I'll just get a few insights from people. What have you picked? Because of course I know I've picked a few things here and there that fine. The thing is, try to bring what you think is yours closer to you. Okay? When the scenario of importation of goods and the likes is, the more you bring closer your food to yourself, you have some sort of independence that you're shaping. Okay? Now, the same comes to your freedom. The more you try to bring your freedom closer to yourself, okay, the more you live its fullness. I don't know whether we're getting that. Okay, I think let me get just 1 or 2, 3 insights from whoever. Okay, then Joram will share.
People are refusing the first chance. What I get is that Behrman advocates for rights for an individual. And he talks about an individual who is independent in the society, where an individual owns himself, control what he owns. He talked about the system, decentralized system. He talked about cryptocurrency, where you decentralize your transaction, your money, and your business. He talks about taxes that are exorbitant, and he wants to provide a solution. The solution is cryptocurrency, having virtual money that is controlled by you and no third party involved in the process. I still want to talk and rebut on that.
Again, I don't, anyway, let's move. Yeah, it's fine. Well, I listened to him, but me, the questions I have, I wish he was here, I would ask him, you know? We are asking the questions. But let me bring them in form of insights. I feel like he's your twin, Arthur, you're a twin with him in thought, because he talks about government and how it doesn't have the best interests for us. And now I wonder, does he have the best interests for us? No, wait. They are not questions for you, they are his. So I'll bring them as insights for us to reflect on. Maybe you can react to them, but maybe you can't answer them the way I can ask them to him. Then secondly, he talks about, one, the interest government has for us. But then secondly, what is intriguing is that in the country where he lives, government, the things he's telling us not to rely on, government gives us. This gentleman, I've been saying him, Larry, yesterday, talked about us having the right to receive the things we expect from government, right? And somehow the message from him feels like we shouldn't rely on those things. Yet, for example, in my small business, government taxes me and makes all these promises, so I should hold it accountable. So if I don't have to expect from them, then why should they tax me and do other things? So I kind of disagree with him on that point. Thirdly, he talks about the funds he tries to send and there's a limitation. I don't know how to better frame it, but I feel like he's one of the people promoting crypto. You know, possibly for our own good, but also for business. As you said, he's a business person. But now I'm also challenged when he says he tries to send money and we can't get it because he has crypto. And if crypto is a trade that we are supposed to like and deal with, why is it hard to send money from, let's say, crypto to other forms if you're sending it to people who need it? So maybe anyone who uses crypto here can give clarity. If after you have crypto and you really want to give me money and I don't use crypto, there should be a way for you to convert crypto into the currency that I can use. However, I love one of the things he has said. He talks about us embracing, creating real solutions like indulging in agriculture, trade, advocating for our rights wherever possible, regardless of what government thinks, getting into production for our own food. Those are very beautiful points. I'm into the medical part, and we encourage a lot of indigenous, growth of plants so that we can sustain our own drug, industry, but also food generally, because we are depending a lot on inputs coming from abroad, which is not sustainable for us. So I really learned a lot from him, although I have those intriguing questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the financial aspect I can actually tell you, even locally here, that I don't know whether you're, okay, I did some contract with AFC and they wired some money to my account, just in Uganda. Okay, I just want to give this scenario here. Fine, with crypto, I think if you understand the digital currency market in Uganda, it's a little bit floppy. That is one thing. And then again, if you really got him well, he didn't actually say crypto is hard. It's the easiest, but because in Uganda it is harder, so he uses other mechanisms, and his complaint was on the other systems and the channels, okay? Because even you, Aisha, the day you'll try to send money out of the country, it's taxed as repatriation. Okay, and before you know, if you want to really send me 100,000 and you're sending it out, it may reach as 20,000. Okay, so those are the complications and the breakings. But then again, about why it gets hard, even in Uganda alone, there's a time AFC did transact some payment, and actually it did look to be a lot of money, but I was called. The bank, first of all, had to hold the money. And then I was called that, go to the RDC. This is AFC paying for a contract that's locally done, leave alone even trying to do actually money coming out of the country. Okay? So those are some of the suspicions. It says that the government really tries to come in even into your finances, that, hey, Aisha is getting 15 million from AFC. What does it have to do, Okay, in that aspect. But on the issue of the hardship, he didn't actually say. Actually said crypto is the easiest, but because in Uganda, it's hard to withdraw crypto, you really have to go through the alternatives. The hardest channel is in the financial transfer system. This is the reality. It is extremely hard to transfer resources. Okay? But the whole issue why it is hard is not because I'm in Uganda, it's because the systems of the governments trying to control different avenues make it hard. I don't know whether you get it. You're getting it. Okay? When it comes to the finances. And then talking about expecting less from the government and then stuff, his only encouragement is, there's this dependency syndrome that we end up shaping by thinking, okay, I pay taxes, so let me, be this sort of less. So his entire insights is on the dependency syndrome that yes, he talked of consciousness. Live conscious that yes, I pay taxes and the government is to be held up, but do not over-rely on it, okay? Do not lay down the tools and think, if I pay taxes for this other thing, let me just let it be, and government should really come, but if you can really get it to you. But be conscious, he talked of consciousness, okay? It doesn't mean, of course, if you're paying taxes, say, let them enjoy it and the likes, okay? So that is key, but going forward, we shall interact more and more and get deeper.